Right here tonight at 5:30, a new projection has egg prices climbing much more than was predicted just last month. And that's only one reason consumers are feeling uncertain.
Mr. President, you have been very clear.
The high cost of eggs, and we've seen consumer confidence this week have a sharp drop from last month, the biggest dip in, I believe, 3 years. Why is that your assessment? Why is that the case, and is there anything we can do?
Consumer confidence.
The numbers are in, and they spell disaster for Donald Trump. The Consumer Confidence Index has just plummeted, marking the sharpest decline of his presidency, and he is very furious. This isn't just another bad poll. This is a major warning sign that Americans are losing faith in the economy, in their job security, and in Trump's ability to turn things around. For a president who built his entire brand on being a businessman, an economic savior, and the leader who would bring back jobs, this is the worst kind of news. Because when confidence drops, so does everything else. Spending, investing, hiring, and once that downward spiral starts, it's hard to stop.
Well, I think that consumer confidence, if you look at confidence in the nation, it had the biggest increase in the history of the chart. It went up 42 points in a period of like days after the election, since the election. So since the election, the confidence in our nation, including right track, wrong track, the first time it's ever happened where we were on the right track, because this country has been on the wrong track for a long time. So the confidence in business, confidence in the country has reached an all-time high.
So what's behind this sudden collapse in consumer confidence? Why are even Trump's most loyal supporters starting to question whether his economic policies are actually working or if they've been left behind? And most importantly, is this the beginning of a full-blown economic crisis? Welcome, let's break it all down in today's video.
Consumer spending drives 2/3 of economic activity in this country, so it's a big deal. We're already seeing evidence of that. Retail sales were down significantly in January. We're hearing companies like Walmart warn of a slowdown. And in fact, there's a portion of this index that has predicted past recessions. Yesterday, the data showed that we have dipped below that tipping point. Doesn't mean it's always right, but it's a red flag.
The American economy thrives on confidence. Consumers need to feel secure about their financial future to keep spending. Businesses need to trust the market to keep hiring, and investors need stability to keep putting money into stocks and infrastructure. But right now, that trust is evaporating in what many are referring to as the perfect storm of Trump's economy.
New evidence that Americans are worried about prices and tariffs that President Trump has promised on some foreign goods. U.S. consumer confidence dropping, posting the largest monthly decline since August 2021. And now, more discouraging news from the supermarket.
$7.50 a dozen is absolutely ridiculous.
Egg prices are predicted to jump even more than expected due to bird flu outbreaks. The Agriculture Department now expecting prices to rise more than 40% this year, double the increase predicted just last month. Some people are deciding to raise their own chickens. Sales for chicks, hens, and coops skyrocketing.
For years, Trump has told Americans that his economic policies would fix everything. More jobs, lower taxes, a booming stock market, cheaper gas, that was the promise. But now, reality is setting in, and it's not looking good. Unemployment has crept back up to 4%, a sharp rise from the 3.5% recorded in 2020. That might not sound like a huge jump, but in economic terms, it's the difference between a thriving job market and one that's slowing down. Gas prices have skyrocketed by 177%, leaving millions of Americans struggling to fill their tanks. Higher fuel costs don't just hit drivers, they make everything more expensive, from groceries to shipping costs. Food costs are up by 12%, meaning that families across America are feeling the squeeze every time they step into a supermarket.
Our business has gone up 50%. I do get people from all over California driving up as far as from San Diego, Oregon, Nevada.
But raising chickens isn't cheap. Some enclosures cost up to $15,000, and there are safety concerns.
We have had cases of avian influenza from wild birds getting into backyard chickens and from backyard chickens getting into humans.
One safety tip for chicken owners: ask any guests who may have been around other birds to remove their shoes before entering your yard. And for the rest of us buying our eggs,
For millions of Americans, this isn't just a statistic. This is their daily reality. The price of groceries, rent, and even basic necessities is climbing faster than wages. And for those living paycheck to paycheck, the squeeze is becoming unbearable.
Denny's, Waffle House, and many other restaurants and bakeries say they have no other choice but to raise prices. Rhiannon Alley, ABC News, New York.
The Trump administration says it will release a new plan soon to tackle the bird flu. Some are pushing to vaccinate chickens, but opponents warn that overseas trading partners won't buy vaccinated chickens. The main concerns is that vaccines could mask, cover the presence of the virus.
Take the story of a former Trump supporter from Nashville, Tennessee. He was a factory worker convinced that Trump's economic policies would bring manufacturing jobs back to America. He voted for Trump twice, but after his company shut down due to budget cuts and lack of support from the government, he lost everything: his job, his benefits, and his belief that Trump was looking out for people like him. And he's not alone.
So this was not the reading that we wanted, and markets are certainly reacting the same. However, it does underscore another confidence reading that we got last week from the University of Michigan, which was also bad. What this tells you is that consumers aren't feeling great about where the economy is going. Particularly, I was just reading through the release. They think inflation is going to be 6%.
Wow.
Yes, we are at 3% right now, 6% in a year. Now that comes up from 5.2%, which was the last reading. The other thing that I want to tease out here, the expectations index. That's basically the short-term expectations for your income, business, and the economy at large.
A recent poll revealed that over 35% of voters who supported Trump in 2020 are now rethinking their support. That's not a small number. That's a massive shift that could completely reshape the next election. These aren't just independent voters. These are people who wore MAGA hats, attended rallies, and defended Trump against every accusation, but now they're looking at their bank accounts, their gas bills, and their shrinking paychecks, and they're starting to wonder if they've been sold a dream that was never meant to come true.
It dipped to 72.9. That is really important because 80 is the threshold for when you start to see potentially a recession looming. That's the tipping point. We haven't been below that number since June 2024.
So when people don't have confidence in the way it's measured with this index, what does it mean for what they are actually spending on? Because I'm just curious, I know the market is down and it's headed lower, but people are still spending, people are still buying things, people are still going on vacation. Even now, we did a segment, you probably saw it earlier this morning, with Jill Schlesinger talking about home buyers, and she talked about how there may be some relief for people who want to buy a home in the spring. So people are still spending money. What does this all mean?
Economic downturns don't happen overnight. They build up little by little with warning signs flashing before the collapse. And right now, all the warning lights are blinking red. Looking at the stock market chaos, the Dow Jones has dropped by 9% in just 6 months, wiping out billions in retirement savings. Investors are getting nervous, and when investors panic, the economy follows. Americans are battling with soaring prices.
Look, consumers are significantly less optimistic than they used to be, and that shift happened pretty quickly. And I was digging into the data, Tony, and tariffs. They were mentioned by nearly every single household and business surveyed. Also, the job market and rising inflation. In fact, based on this data, consumers think that inflation is going to hit 6% within 12 months. Now, that is much above the Federal Reserve's 2% target. These consumers, they may not be right, but this does give us a real-time gauge of how they're feeling.
Yeah, so when it comes to a recession, recessions are about fundamentals, but also about feelings. If people are feeling not so confident, could that bring on a recession?
Potentially. How consumers feel impacts how they spend.
It can't be truer than that. The cost of everyday essentials is not just hitting, but going through the roof. Eggs up 23%, sugar up 16%, milk up 12%. These aren't luxury items. These are the things families rely on to get by. And let's not forget falling consumer spending. Americans are tightening their wallets, spending less on everything from groceries to big purchases. When people stop spending, businesses start cutting jobs. And when that cycle begins, it's almost impossible to stop.
They have been spending money, but if you listen to the retail earnings that we have gotten, it's not about the backward looking, it's about their guidance. You heard Walmart say, we may see a slowdown, and we're going to get Target and a number of the other retailers in the next few weeks. We're starting to see these big companies, which are often economic bellwethers for the consumer, saying even though we provide need to have items, we're expecting a little bit of a slowdown. And so we haven't seen that yet in terms of the retail numbers. Actually, I should correct myself. We did see a slowdown in January.
Right.
It dipped in like the biggest dip in 2 years. So you're starting to see some cracks, not across all income levels. People making above 100,000 are still out there spending, but lower income folks, they're feeling it right now.
Now brave yourself for what's perhaps the biggest warning sign. Trump's approval rating among rural voters has dropped by 12% in the past 2 years. That's his base. The voters who were supposed to stick with him no matter what. And now, many are starting to see the cracks in his promises. One of Trump's biggest campaign promises was to put America first by fighting back against unfair trade deals. And so, he launched trade wars with China, Mexico, Canada, and Europe. But here's the problem. Those tariffs and trade battles didn't help American workers. They hurt them.
U.S. consumer confidence fell at its sharpest pace in 3.5 years in February, while inflation expectations surged. That's according to a report from the Conference Board, which indicated Americans were growing more anxious about the potential negative impact of President Donald Trump's policies on the economy. A senior economist with the Conference Board said that comments on the current administration and its policies dominated the responses to the latest survey. And there was a sharp increase in mentions of tariffs and trade, back to a level unseen since 2019. Other economists said unprecedented layoffs of federal government workers were also taking a toll on consumers' psyche.
I do get people from all over California driving up as far as from San Diego, Oregon, Nevada.
But raising chickens isn't cheap. Some enclosures cost up to $15,000, and there are safety concerns.
We have had cases of avian influenza from wild birds getting into backyard chickens and from backyard chickens getting into humans.
One safety tip for chicken owners?
Farmers in the Midwest who once supported Trump overwhelmingly are now seeing their crop prices plummet because China stopped buying American soybeans. Thousands of small businesses that relied on cheap imports have had to shut down because of increased costs. And now, as Canada and Mexico are cutting trade ties with the U.S. and strengthening their economic relationships with the EU, American industries are being left behind.
Well, good afternoon to you, Barbara. That month, the month dip, just as you mentioned, from January to February, is the biggest dip in consumer confidence since August of 2021. And this afternoon, nearly everyone, I'm told, is feeling the pinch.
It's hard making ends meet for our nonprofit and everything.
Wade Rosar runs the nonprofit Friends of Hometown Heroes. They supply bulletproof vests to police departments for canines. And as outlined in today's Conference Board report, consumer confidence coming in at a low 98.3, down from 105.3 in January, serving as a snapshot of how he and his business are struggling to survive financially, trying to continue to make an impact.
This is probably one of the worst years I've seen. Over.
Trump's trade war was supposed to be a power move, a way to force other countries to play fair. But instead, it made those countries look elsewhere for trade deals, leaving American businesses struggling to keep up. Now most Americans are labeling his plans the dark MAGA strategy they never saw coming. As his economic policies fail to deliver, Trump is not taking responsibility. Instead, he's doing what he does best, blaming others.
We must have only the highest standards for those who work in our aviation system. I changed the Obama standards from very mediocre at best to extraordinary. You remember that. Only the highest aptitude, they have to be the highest intellect and psychologically superior people were allowed to qualify for air traffic controllers. That was not so prior to getting there. When I arrived in 2016, I made that change very early on because I always felt this was a job that, and other jobs too, but this was a job that had to be superior intelligence, and we didn't really have that, and we had it. And then when I left office and Biden took over, he changed them back to lower
His latest move is about rallying supporters around the dark MAGA movement, a far-right push to blame Democrats, global elites, and anyone who doesn't support Trump for America's economic struggles, but the numbers don't lie.
And so ultimately, as these companies pull back expectations for what they expect for their revenues, that could lead to potential layoffs. We've already seen it in some companies. I know today you were on CBS Mornings talking about Starbucks, and I know that that was at the corporate level, but what does it portend for the future?
Well, if people spend less, the cuts need to come from somewhere, right? You need to cut your costs. So you could see something like that. And then, of course, you just layer on this potential tariff threat that we've been getting, and that would increase costs, increase prices for consumers. They might spend less. So it's a really tricky chicken and egg thing.
Trump's corporate tax cuts benefited the ultra-wealthy, not the working class. His tariff wars raised prices for everyday consumers rather than helping American businesses. His economic policies widened the wealth gap, making it harder for low-income families to survive. Despite this, Trump continues to claim that the real problem is the Democratic Party, globalists, and the media, and his hardcore supporters are still buying into it. The big question now is, can Trump turn things around before it's too late? If consumer confidence continues to drop, businesses will stop hiring, people will spend even less, and the U.S. could slip into a full-blown recession. And once that happens, it will be nearly impossible for Trump to recover politically. With his approval rating already plummeting, he faces an uphill battle to convince Americans that he's the right leader to fix the economy. But here's the truth. His policies caused this mess, and unless he changes course fast, his presidency could end in economic disaster. So, will he wake up and take action, or will he keep blaming everyone else while the economy continues to collapse around him? Kindly share your opinions and suggestions in the comments, and don't hesitate to like and subscribe for more.